Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to break down the key tactical themes in Liverpool's 5-3 win over Chelsea at Anfield. When we break down the game, when we do look at the board, we have Liverpool in a 4-3-3 with Wijnaldum, Fabinho, and Naby Keita in that midfield. And we ended up seeing Chelsea name an unchanged side, barring the fact that Kepa came back into the starting lineup for Willy Caballero. So when we break down this game, we have to focus on Chelsea as they were playing for a Champions League spot. So when we break down their 3-4-3, we're going to look at how they look to approach the game defensively and where they were able to find key attacking areas to exploit that Liverpool defense. Without the ball, you had Giroud just ahead of the center backs, and obviously when you look at Chelsea's shape, they were supposed to be a 5-4-1 without the ball. You have Mount and Willian stepping out into the Liverpool fullbacks. In that midfield zone, it should be Georginio and Kovacic stepping out into the path of Naby Keita and Wijnaldum. And then you have Chelsea's back three against Liverpool's front three. With Mount and Willian stepping to the Liverpool fullbacks, that allows Alonso and Reece James to deal with Mo Salah and Sadio Mane, and then that gives them cover with Azpilicueta and Rudiger. And the only reason that you would need those players in Reece James and Marcus Alonso to step forward was if Liverpool were able to bypass Mount and James to get the ball out to Robertson and Alexander-Arnold. The other area that Chelsea really had to focus on was that midfield zone, because Fabinho would be the key man if Chelsea are playing a two-man midfield. What we ended up seeing was that Giroud ended up sticking towards Fabinho, and then you would have Kovacic and Georginio close out the Liverpool shuttlers. There were times where we did see Giroud step out into Gomez and Van Dijk, and then you would see Georginio step out into the path of Fabinho to try and squeeze Liverpool. And if that wasn't the case, then you would see Giroud stepping out to one of the center backs and then blocking off the passing lane into Fabinho. And with Chelsea 3v3 in that midfield zone, that would tempt Firmino to drop off deeper to create an overload, but we did see Kurt Zouma stick tight on Firmino to ensure that he couldn't impact the game in deeper positions. But when you assess that opening half, Chelsea did a fairly decent job of limiting Liverpool's ability to test Kepa. Out on that left-hand side, Robertson and Mane didn't get behind Reece James and Azpilicueta, and Reece James in particular did a very good job in 1v1 duels against Mane. And frankly, Liverpool's key attacking player in terms of getting beyond that Chelsea backline was Mo Salah. And in those opening 15 minutes, we witnessed how threatening Salah could be from that left side of the pitch. Whether it be him cutting across Alonso and squaring the ball across Rudiger into the path of Firmino, dropping off Zouma and getting it back, there he was blocked off by Rudiger and Alonso, so he couldn't get onto that 1-2. No less than seconds later, Mason Mount dropped off a bit deeper, but Salah easily skipped by him. And then when he faced Rudiger and Alonso at that box, he ended up playing a 1-2 with Wijnaldum to bypass Alonso. But when he was looking to receive the pass back from Wijnaldum, he was blocked off by Rudiger once again. Later on in that half, we witnessed a Chelsea breakdown that did see Alexander-Arnold wrap the ball around Alonso, who was stepping forward, into the path of Wijnaldum, who was running off Kovacic because Mount also stepped into the path of Alexander-Arnold. When Wijnaldum received the ball, he dropped it off to Salah, and Salah was able to skip by Kovacic and Rudiger to break into the box, but he hesitated on shooting or passing, and Rudiger was able to poke it away for a corner. And when Liverpool wanted to play a bit longer, they were able to bypass Mount once again to play in Trent Alexander-Arnold. This time he located Salah's run in between Rudiger and Azpilicueta into the box. Salah is able to bring it down, but Azpilicueta does a good recovering job for Rudiger to ensure that Salah can't test Kepa. The key tactical theme for Chelsea in this game was how they were able to get into good attacking areas beyond that Liverpool defense. We know that Liverpool like to press from the front, and given the fact that Chelsea were playing a back three, you ended up seeing Liverpool's front three stepping towards their back three, with Mane and Salah looking to block off the passing lanes into the path of the wingbacks. This is the standard Liverpool press that we have seen this season. And then in that midfield zone, when Kovacic and Georginio try to drop off a bit deeper, they have Fabinho and Wijnaldum stepping into their path, and Naby Keita simply dropping off, ready to shoot out into the path of Reece James if the ball is played into that zone. zone. But Liverpool's passing throughout this game wasn't aggressive, and what we ended up seeing from Chelsea was that they were able to manipulate their 3-4-2-1 system along with the help of their attacking line to ensure that they consistently played balls out into the wing backs to push forward. What you ended up seeing from that Chelsea front line was that Mason Mount was often adopting spaces in between Alexander-Arnold and Gomez. Giroud was occupying the two center backs, and then Willian was adopting a narrow position just ahead of Robertson. So that meant that there were vacant spaces out in those wider areas for the wing backs to push forward due to the narrow positioning of Mount and Willian, and also given the fact that there was no outlying presser for those wing backs if Chelsea were able to switch play efficiently. Because in open play, when Liverpool are tasked with marking out Kovacic and Georginio, the space out in those wider areas eventually are created because Salah and Mane have to be tracking back to deal with Reece James and Marcus Alonso due to Willian and Mason Mount's narrow positioning that drag out the Liverpool fullbacks. We saw Azpilicueta clip a diagonal ball over Mason Mount and Alexander-Arnold for Marcus Alonso pushing forward, but his early cross was cleared by Joe Gomez. Later on, we ended up seeing Zuma clip the ball over Salah into the path of Alonso. He pushed forward, hit another diagonal ball out to Reece James beyond Sadio Mane. That's where you see Willian darting in between Robertson and Van Dijk to receive a poked ball into that right channel. And Willian ended up poking it back into the path of Reece James, who located Mason Mount darting between the center backs, and his cross over Van Dijk saw Mason Mount waste a great effort from 6 yards out. Zuma was also able to exploit Mane's positioning by clipping diagonal balls out to Reece James, but even when Reece James pushed forward into those advanced positions, his first time cross was cleared by Robertson at the front post. And if we look to one final example, once again it's Zuma clipping that diagonal ball over Mane into the path of Reece James, chesting it down ahead of Robertson. When he receives the ball, you have Giroud ahead of Gomez between the center backs. You have Mount looking to run across Alexander-Arnold. And once again, it's Willian darting in between that gap between Van Dijk and Robertson to receive that ball in that right channel. But before Van Dijk does get across, Willian fires his cross into the path of Alisson. So as you can see, the movement of Chelsea's front three created space for the Chelsea wingbacks to push forward, given the fact that the Liverpool shuttlers couldn't switch out in time and Mane and Salah weren't tracking their runs. The problem that Chelsea encountered when they got into these good positions was that there was no service for Giroud because the crossing from the wingbacks were poor. And when you look to Willian and Mount getting into good positions around the box, they were simply wasteful and should have done better. However, when we look to the start of the second half, the overall pattern of the game didn't shift. We still had Reece James pushing forward and playing balls into Willian between Robertson and Van Dijk, but Willian's touches were poor. And when we look to Liverpool, it was still the threat of Mo Salah dropping off Rudiger and exploiting that space to make the difference. Liverpool were able to add to their lead from a prototypical goal from Alexander-Arnold. Alonso didn't step into his path, Mount didn't retreat, and it allowed Alexander-Arnold time to deliver a cross for Firmino darting between Azpilicueta and Zuma to increase Liverpool's lead. Following Liverpool taking a 3-goal lead, Lampard introduced a direct goal threat in Pulisic, and that ultimately shifted the game. When you look to Abraham's goal, you end up seeing Pulisic receive the ball in that left touchline position, and he was able to beat Fabinho, Gomez, and Alexander-Arnold before sliding the ball across Van Dijk for an Abraham tap-in, and you wouldn't get that from Mason Mount. Later on, what you ended up seeing was that Reece James was able to break free once again down that right-hand side. You had Abraham running across Gomez, and then you had Pulisic darting across Alexander-Arnold, and he was able to bring down the ball, and frankly, he should have made it 4-3 there, but he was able to add to his goal tally minutes later, and even when you look to that goal, you see all the substitutes involved. Abraham occupying Gomez and Van Dijk, and the throw-in goes over all of them. And Hudson-Odoi makes the run across Jones, and you end up seeing Pulisic also making his run across Trent Alexander-Arnold. And that's where you witness Pulisic's composure and cool finish, and that's also something we didn't get from Mason Mount throughout that game. But as you can see, Chelsea's overall approach here was logical. They were able to get the wingbacks into very good positions beyond Mane and Salah. The problem here was the lack lack of quality once they got into the final third. The crosses weren't that great. Mason Mount was losing possession. Willian wasn't able to find Giroud. But when we ended up seeing Chelsea shift to Abraham, Pulisic, and Hudson-Odoi, there was a shift mainly through Pulisic, who was making intelligent runs in behind, and his dribbling was causing that Liverpool backline a few issues. What you can say about Chelsea here also is the fact that they struggle to cope with Mo Salah, and frankly on another day he could have scored 2 or even 3 goals in a game that ultimately means that Chelsea have to get at least a point in their final game against Wolves to claim a Champions League spot. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.